Welcome to the IpX True North podcast, where we connect people, processes, and tools.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the IpX True North podcast, where we break down the biggest challenges facing organizations in the digital age. Today, we're talking about one of the most frustrating hurdles that companies face when trying to adopt AI, data readiness. If AI is only as good as the data it's trained on, getting that data in order is extremely critical. But why is it so difficult? So to answer that question, I'm joined by Mr. Tony Cahill, the mind behind Crystal Onyx, a platform that removes the bottlenecks in data management and helps organizations take control of their data and AI strategies. Welcome back to the show, Tony.
Thank you very much for having me, Brandy. Great to see you again and really appreciate the time and invitation to join you.
Yeah, I love it. I love having you back on. So, Tony, to help our listeners, help us walk through a little bit of the AI project cycle steps. That
Sure,
way it'll get us grounded for the rest of the conversation.
absolutely. Yeah, typically it's defined in AI project cycles, really 5 steps, and it starts with the problem, problem identification. What are we trying to solve? What's our issue? And then more importantly, what's the scope and how do we break that down to a use case, right? So that's solvable. And also creates an outcome that we can track. Next is the data acquisition. Where's the data we have? It's siloed, how do we start to get access to it? And then move it to a location or make it available so that we can start to go through, explore it, analyze it, and start to curate data sets that we can use for submitting into either the AI or the machine learning ML operations, which is really your modeling. And so from that comes the output tokens. What do we get out of it? And there then becomes the evaluation, right? That's the final 5th step. Evaluate what we've done. Did we hit the mark? Do we need to make changes? Do we have to make tweaks? And so at that point, it becomes just an iteration. We iterate and repeat. And you could iterate and repeat all the way back to maybe step 1, where, okay, we have to redefine our problem or our use case. Or is it 2? So you can iterate through any of those steps, tweaking all of the elements here to really figure out and getting your optimum outcome. And this is a challenge just I see facing a lot of companies. And as you go through this, there's can be breakdowns. And one of the things that I kind of thought was maybe interesting to talk about today was the idea about data readiness, because I see that as being one of the most challenging issues that organizations really struggle with. How do you get the data structured? Where is it? Are we getting everything we need? Are we getting the right information and the right data? And really, we see that this both applies to both generative AI as well as agentic AI projects.
And sometimes, you and I have talked in the past about the data value chain. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think it kind of lines us up as well for this discussion.
Sure. Thank you for asking that. So the data value chain really goes through, and it really becomes part of the whole AI project, because one is how do you capture, how do you identify this data? And as we're going through it, every organization has just been storing all of their files, all of their data for years. There's value to it, right? There's value to the organization. If there wasn't value, why are you storing it, right? So with that, how do you start to identify how can we convert this from just being able to store it and start to create it as an asset that actually can be monetized or has an ROI component? And so as you're going through this and applying either the machine learning or AI elements on this, you're creating inference, you're creating, outcomes to better understand the data so we can then have strategic value of, how to create automation, how to create analysis, look at, how to do for some different modeling and predictions. So with that, the data itself, those files have the ability then to keep with it metadata, information more about it that enriches it and starts to really tell the story about what this file actually can mean. And then how it can be applied is where we start to look at, okay, the data analytics, the data insights, and how that applies and then can create value for the organization. And so It's an interesting concept because everyone has all of the data, but it's how you go through that process step to really create that value chain. And one of the challenges around doing that process is how do we know that we have everything that's relevant, right? So if I'm an organization that has grown over years, 20, 30 years, I have just silos and silos and silos of different data that we are either actively using or have actively used in the past that has a lot of intrinsic value that can be pulled from it. How do you make sure that you can easily get access to those? And so I see that that becomes a challenge a lot of times to a lot of larger organizations.
This is perfect. So talking about the data silos and, with the acquisitions that companies have or just becoming global in the multiple sites that they have, it's really easy to see how quickly, this data can grow and how complicated your environment can get. And so, it leads us right into what we want to talk about today with the problem statement is getting back to AI and why do organizations struggle to get started with AI adoption? And it's really with this core issue we're talking about. Why is it so difficult for companies to get their data ready for AI? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, because AI has this big mysticism, right? It's this, ooh, it's shiny thing. Also, it's really cool. Everyone wants, like, we need AI, we want to do it. We know we need it. Okay, so what? Then what? But we're finding what's interesting is once you kind of get your mind around it, the biggest challenge isn't AI itself or being able to implement the AI project itself. It's to make sure you've got the right data that you're feeding into it. So, that whole idea about data readiness. So for an enterprise business, it's typically, a high stakes environment. There could be a lot of great and good things that come up from it, but there can also be a lot of caveats and a lot of issues and challenges and possibly mistakes that you want to make sure that you're aware of. So as you go into it, you've got your eyes wide open. But we see that at the heart of any AI project cycle of those 5 steps, it really comes down to 3 key things. First off is what is the problem you're trying to solve? If you don't know the problem, you're not going to get a good output. It's this whole idea about, when you prompt an AI, the more clear your prompt is, the better the outcome
Yep.
of what you're getting. And that's really, really clear and really important here. The next thing is, what are the data sets that you're going to use? And within that data set, how do you know that it's everything you need in order to be successful? And more importantly, are we missing anything or are we just doing too much? Because you can throw up everything and then realize, well, we only needed maybe 50% of what we did. So it's really that idea of, is this what we needed? Is this the right data set? And how do we curate and start to get our arms around it? And it's easier when you're smaller and have less data to go through. But you start compiling it and it just compounds. Once you start getting multiple systems, multiple disparate locations, and different types of technologies, it can get really challenging to figure out how to go through this.
Yeah.
Then the other important piece, and it's probably the last piece of this, is then how are you going to monitor? How are you going to test the outcomes and then be able to make the changes to iterate and tweak it so you can get to that final optimum outcome that you're looking for? So what's interesting I found is that I've been researching this now for a long time. Probably last long time meeting, in AI project world is probably 4 months, maybe 6 months. But what I find is that, in all recent studies, going back, and this is articles from Forbes, IBM, different consulting groups that are published on the web, that 42% across the board have identified that on their polls, all the respondents identified that data availability and data quality has been identified as one of the top 5 challenges for implementing a successful AI project. And usually it's within the top 3, depending on who you talk to. Once you start to add then transparency, data governance, oversight, now combining those together, it's 100%. These are the challenges that everyone is dealing with. And that if you don't have a good answer or a good approach for, you're not going to have a successful outcome for your AI project. And the result of that is going to be, lost time, could be lost revenue, could be just a costly mistake that you have to throw out and start over again. So, it's being able to have some foresight as you step into this, I think really behooves any company to create a successful plan for a successful implementation.
Makes sense. So, many organizations, they struggle because they have old repositories. It may be hard to access that repository, or they have
Certainly.
things in the cloud and they're struggle to be able to utilize that if they're trying to pull that on a daily basis, or many other potential challenges. And so, to be clear, it's AI isn't the roadblock itself in any way. It's the data disorganization or silos or access and understanding of what data they have. When you think about this holistically, that companies have to get their hands around before AI can really be effective and prove the value that it's promising. So
That's correct.
cleaning up your
That's
house
correct.
per se, right?
But basically, yeah, because if you look at it, I mean, data is the foundation of any AI system. If you don't have it, you're not going to get anything out of it. And it doesn't matter if it's structured, unstructured, a third party. But one of the biggest things we see that is a challenge is dealing with that unstructured data, the big data.
Yeah.
That companies have been buying a bunch of storage, and whether it be cloud, libraries, archives, all sales, silos, legacy systems. And AI projects, the technology, I'm just amazed at how fast it's been developing. And it really has gotten to the point where it has potential to deliver some incredible insights, incredible automation, and some of the new things that are coming out with the agents, I'm blown away with. I mean, I remember it would take us, months to do something that now with like 5, 10 lines of code, you can come out with the same result. So it's going to have a very significant effect on how we're going to use technology to align this to how we operate and how we operate on a daily basis within a company and delivering value to customers. And it comes back to if that company doesn't have access to that clean, well-organized data set, then you're going to be sitting trying to figure out how to deal with all the fragmented records. How do we get access to this? And it can get costly just for that aspect of it. And that's one of the things that we really identified as what we could provide value and be of help and service with. We also identified that another significant challenge that customers are facing is how do you integrate that data and the data sources, the data from various different sources. So again, silo data stored in disparate systems, making that difficult to compile and create a cohesive data set. So then you start adding IoT devices, you start adding remote systems, remote sites, and all that starts to add just the complexity of this data integration. And so some organizations will say, well, just give us everything and then we can sort it out later. Well, you could do that, but it's just kind of like taking, well, hey, I want to clean up my house by buying another house and moving all our stuff over. You end up just with the same problem. So the issue with data quality alone, you start to see a cost develop from this. And this starts to then just alone, you start to identify, well, Jesus, we're going through this. How much revenue have we been losing? How many operational setbacks have we been having? How have we had to do all these gyrations to make this work? So, and just that alone, not even including AI, is estimated that enterprise companies are typically losing probably around 10 to 12 million annually just due to poor quality of data and how they're accessing it. So kind of cool by taking this project, an AI project, actually gives an opportunity to go back and clean the house to really start to make things more effective. And so, we see that with Crystal Onyx, we have the ability to significantly improve the outcome, not just for the AI project cycle, but also just for the organization in general. And our value add proposition that we're delivering is that we know we can ensure data quality, be able to significantly decrease the time and cost it takes to do this, and enable the creation of the data value chain. So if you look at just that, decrease in time and cost, if we go through and take everything and upload it to the cloud, I don't care what provider you want to use. You're basically going through and saying, okay, team, go find it, copy everything, move it up there, and then we'll figure it out. Kind of kicking the can down the road in some respects.
For sure. And I know, some of the numbers of, that we've talked about are quite staggering with regards to what people are paying today or willing to tolerate with regards to time if they're utilizing, let's say, like a third party company or some additional resources to try to sort through their data problem to try to pull this together. And
Yep.
so it's just super prohibitive, the timeline and the cost just to understand what data we have before we can even get to this point it's crazy staggering. And so I love, talking with you about some of the different and looking on your website and reading about some of the companies that you've helped already with regards to how do they get a quick visible access of everything that they have and then being able to do stuff with it very quickly, very easily. And so, to me, Crystal Onyx has that ability to remove some of these barriers to AI adoption, just really streamline this approach, get them there very quickly, potentially from some of the things we've discussed over 10 to 12 months of data assessment in organization down to maybe even weeks. So for certain organizations. So how does Crystal Onyx eliminate these obstacles?
Well, it really comes down to, because we cut our teeth on this early on, working with high performance computing centers, we saw that there was going to be a challenge, that in these organizations, it was kind of a precursor to AI. And you had all of these different silos of data that did not talk to each other. So you had to have different systems be able to pull out, find something, transfer that over to another system that would then transfer it to another system. So it was really, really not complex, but it was very manual, right? And you start doing this across large amounts of data sets, that just becomes very unruly. So we kind of got an early view of what we saw what was going to be coming. And we worked with organizations like Bosch with doing AI autonomous vehicle testing. We saw the German Climate Center, which is the second largest supercomputing center in Europe, and how that they were being challenged with all of the different types of storage environments and what they were currently trying to do to make it work. So we were able to come in and, first off, just be able to scan everything. So what's great about this is we saw this is then applies directly to advantage within an AI project for a company, is we can go to any storage system that they have and scan it very quickly, meaning that we're doing it, million or million plus files per hour, and start to create a global namespace. That global namespace is just a virtual representation of everything that we're seeing within their environment. So nothing's moved, nothing's touched. We just have a virtualization of it. Once that's done, we know everything about the files, we know everything about the storage, it's all there, and you can start running reports. You're able to then query, and using our intelligent query system, start to then analyze and identify everything that you have without having to ever have to touch the files. So what's great about that is it's not just a one-time shot. So it's not like we're just going and uploading, ingesting this somewhere. The system actually goes back and based upon the business rules set by the customer or by the company. Is it once every hour? Is it once every day? And it's going through and just updating to making sure that we have all the latest, greatest files and everything that's updated. So you're continuing to work with the live model. The great thing about that is we can start using custom metadata, start to then go and create curation sets of everything that's there. So, what's primary, and really customize it and start to break down that data set into what's the primary, what's most critical, what's then second level critical, what's third level critical, and start even creating iteration groups. So when you're testing, you can do A/B testing. What's our outcomes? But it's a really easy way to do this and quickly. And so in our customers that we've done this with, where they were trying to go through and do it themselves. One great example use case is a customer, as you mentioned or alluded to earlier, they went through and they had around 3 petabytes they were trying to curate the data set on. It took them about 10 to 12 months. They don't know really what they got. They got some. On their second pass, different project, but using the same data set, we were able to go through, get a completely everything. And in fact, we found that they were actually missing files because they couldn't get access to them. So we found another petabyte worth. So we actually had 4 that were able to go through, do this, get a complete curated data set and do it within 8 weeks. And then their whole thing went from 10 to 12 months with, I don't know how many, there's like 12 people involved, down to 8 weeks with 3 people. So just that cost alone, what does that mean on a successful impact? And then does that mean that, gosh, we could even do 2 or 3 or 4 different projects within the same time period that otherwise it would take us to do one, right? So how much more impactful can we be? So, it's taking a different approach. It's thinking outside the box. And it's realizing that if I have all the data, I don't need to necessarily work with all those files and create all this translation and do everything that we need to. First, let's just actually take a snapshot of it, virtualize it, and then work with the virtualization through reporting, through queries, take that curation set, get to what we need to, and then take our next step, which is, okay, let's approach the modeling. And then we also enable that too. But that's a separate approach. The first thing that's the most important is just getting your arms around this data readiness.
It's just a huge shift, right? I just want to reiterate, it's just a huge shift to go from an experience where people are usually doing this manually, where they've pulled in 10, 15, 20 people sequestered to kind of manage. That's what I typically see whenever there's kind of a project where they need to migrate to a new tool or a bunch of data, move a bunch of data, or they're acquiring a company or whatever this needs to be for anything. They sequester a large amount of people and it takes months for them to go through this, sort this stuff. And so what I hear you saying again is that you can take an example, and you've lived this, from a 10 to 12 month manual scenario down to 8 weeks with just a couple people managing this process.
And it's unheard of, right? How fast you can do it if you have the right tool sets.
These are the kind of efficiencies that organizations are really searching for, right? We spend so much more effort for much less of an improvement. So this one to me is just quite grand in scale. So I'm just really excited that we're talking about this one.
Yeah, thank you. And really appreciate the opportunity, an invitation. And what's cool about it is, even though it's a new tool, you're not actually changing anything. We're not saying, oh, you've got to do something completely different. It's just going away a slightly different way about it. And so that's what's really nice, is that we're not forcing anybody to change the way they're going to do business or the way they're going to, change their organization or their approach. We're just going to help make it easier. And what we found is, because Crystal Onyx is able to connect all the dots, and we create the visualization abstraction, we start to enable that flow of data. And this, extends across, all these silos. So you've got your traditional NFS and SMB data shares, NFS for Linux and SMB typically for Mac environments and Windows environments. You've got all the legacy storage environments, right, that go back years, even back to mainframes. Also, parallel file systems, right? So we've got Lustre, GPFS. These are all, very, very fast file systems that are usually used for supercomputing and for AI, and also for any tier 0 where you've got your critical storage. Then we also even extend across to S3 object stores, clouds, multi-clouds, and even able to manage tape libraries directly. We had one customer where we were able to go in and, over the course of 4 days, migrate the access of their entire 350 petabyte library archive and make it available for an open system. So it was going from a legacy environment to an open system environment, and it took us 4 days. Everyone else was coming in and saying, that's going to take 18 months, 20 months. It's like, well, no, we can just think about it differently. And using what we can do with the virtualization, we can make it available to you within 4 days. So those are really kind of the cool things that we can get involved with and really help make it successful and impactful difference. And the thing I like about it is this just is not a one-stop thing. It's not, you don't just upload it, do it. You keep everything where it is. You keep doing your business. We'll come in and just do a scan, and it's a touchless scan. It's very easy, and it's deployed within the environment. So, you don't have to rely on a third party or external. This can be deployed within a company, within their data center, in their environment, either on a bare metal server, on a VM environment, or, even if you need to, a cloud compute environment, or all of the above, and all work in tandem and together. So it's so flexible. And because it's a multi-threaded, multi-process system, That's really, really the key in this because it's very fast and we're doing everything in parallel. So it's not just doing one thing at a time. It's doing 10, 15 different processes all at a time. And as I mentioned earlier, like typically we see a 3-node cluster will often go out and be able to do this at a million or more files an hour.
What I love what you just said, and I think it's worth reiterating, is that Crystal Onyx gives people the ability to bring this in-house, right? It's the utility that they use, that they can do it. You don't have to have like a third party do this, right? You bring the tool into your own facility, your own people are doing this, they're being able to use and access this data in the same way that you get them all up and running, and then the intent is that they got this on their own.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? There's no reason once you have it, do it on your own. If you want to have somebody else come in and do it, great. It's a great tool. It's a force multiplier. We're not looking to replace anybody. We're just looking to help make things run easier and faster. Because really that's what it comes down to. How fast can you do something with the least amount of effort within that affects the organization?
Always. And we briefly talked about this, but I want to hit it one more time. And, we've talked about, data accessibility, the data usability piece, being able to get this data, to move it, all this good stuff. But we also hit the important point of the importance of clean data. And so, briefly, just talk a little bit about that for us, the relationship between AI and data, because data is an organization's gold, right? We've talked about
Right.
and we've said AI models are only as good as the data they learn from, right? So tell me your perspective on clean data.
What that means really is that you don't come out and brush it, right? It's not like you have to clean it up because it got dirty, but it's that the data you have is applying to what you need, right? So it's not a lot of fodder in it. The way we go about it is when you're looking at everything, trying to dig through these haystacks, right, and figure this out. So if you start looking at trends, you start looking at patterns, you get interesting ability of running these intelligent queries. And part of the capability is not just, well, we look at the file system information or we look at the extended metadata, which is powerful to start with, but then let's even go deeper. You start looking at, introspecting a file. Okay, I'm going to open it, see what's here, start looking at the trends, and we start identifying, okay, what's relevant. It starts to become pretty, interesting to identify then. We're looking for everything that has this attribute with it. And it could be an owner, who created it, what department it came from, what was the time frame, what was the project. All of that becomes now relevant for how you can classify the data. And that really is it. How do you classify, right? And then with that, apply governance. How are we going to manage it? Is this in-band? Is this going to be part of our project, or is it going to be out of range? Shouldn't be part of the project because it includes personal information. I know we don't want anything that's going to include people's social security numbers or their credit card information, right? Or anything about your HR information. That sometimes can get included unknowingly. So if you start having the ability of using filters like we're doing, you can then get very granular on how you start to create this data. And as we're identifying it, we're grouping it using the custom metadata fields to then group it into a curated set, and then take that curated set and even fine tune it down further. And it's all being done easy. It's using the power of metadata and creating unique schemas and fields that we can create these granular curated data sets and do it very easily. And again, it only takes like 1 or 2 people to be able to go through this and start to fine tune it. And then when you're applying it not just across each file at a time. You're applying it now across, could be, hundreds to thousands of files at a time to create that set. So that's where it really becomes of the quality, is that you're getting something that is part of answering the question or solving the problem that you've identified to create the best possible outcome. Once you've got your final data curation, identify that we've got quality, we got everything we need. Now you can use the workflow engine of Crystal Onyx to say, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to start moving the files. We're going to copy them from where they are and then copy them to somewhere else. And now we'll go in, and we have what we call an out chest, which is really kind of a checkout. It's a copy out, and you can copy out to any system. If you're going up to Snowflake, Databricks, which is a popular use, other GPU providers, other cloud providers, you have something you're going to move into a parallel file system and run through GPU locally. It just gives you all the flexibility you need to now take that, within weeks, this curated data set that now you're applying to your solution of choice. So it just really streamlines that whole project from start to finish.
Got it. So you get to scan and identify all the data extremely quickly at any repository whatsoever. And then you're using that metadata you can change your metadata, you can categorize it, you can protect data, certain data, critical data. You can utilize that as your mechanism to do anything that you need. And what that does is it gives you that power then to make really good decisions with your data and where you want to move it, what you want to do with it, how do you want to categorize it, how do you want to organize that for AI or for any other tool whatsoever, for any kind of project that you need. So it's really gives you the ability to then automate things too. So if you need to constantly move data that's coming in from one source or from one site to another site, you can do that continually. And with really a lot less manpower than the way organizations are doing this today.
Correct. And that even includes, like, for really sensitive information, right? Where you've got a bunch of different sensitive data and files, creating a data room, right? Which is kind of, we're going to isolate this so that we want to run through these AI, an AI project, but we don't want to run and create any impact, right? Okay, so wonderful. You can actually use the virtualization power of Crystal Onyx to now even export that as a file system. So you can create a whole virtual data room within your place and not have to actually build or separate it. So, it just gives you a lot of capabilities to do things a little bit differently.
You said think differently right there. But that's one thing I really want people to take away from our conversation today is, why do organizations need to rethink their AI approach, right? And so for companies looking to adopt AI or starting to dive into this, what's your biggest piece of advice for either these leaders or even just managers within an organization that are looking to use AI?
The biggest thing is make the decisions that are aligned to what you're trying to accomplish, aligned to the business, because everything, I don't care what it is, every piece of technology takes a certain approach. And that certain approach, is the way they are approaching a problem that may or may not align with the way the company is operating. And this includes us too. If the way we're approaching is very, very specific, and we see that it aligns for a lot of companies, a lot of customers, that doesn't mean it's the de facto standard for everyone. So what I do really quickly is, when we first talk to somebody, is I'm understanding, okay, what are your top 3 challenges? How can we help and resolve? And really quickly, I just can tell it's either we're going to align very well or it's going to intersect. And at that point, if it's intersection, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't matter. And I see this over and over again, trying to take a round peg into a square hole, right? And I see that a lot of people are approaching AI projects that way. Well, this is the way we've done it. This is the way it has been done. Let's repeat it. And sure, and if you push hard enough, you can make that work. Square peg into a round hole. But it takes a lot of effort. You break things along the way. It might not be the best way. So taking a step back and saying, let's approach this a little bit differently. And that's really the great thing, is ensure alignment. And that includes not just with the culture and the operation, but also the people. And then how do you remove unnecessary steps? So one of the big things that we look at, and part of this whole idea around the virtualization, is, why do we need to come and copy everything out first? Why don't we figure out what we can do, what's needed? How do we start to create the data set and curate it and classify it before we start the move? I mean, that saves so much time. It goes from these idea about data lakes, right? Moving everything up and creating a lake so that you have the ability to do the same thing. So we can get away from silos, get away from disparate systems, and put it all together in one lake. But the problem is, when you do that, your lake starts to become a swamp. And so what we decided is we have the ability to actually virtualize it and create a virtual data lake without ever having to move, and then get very clear on what this is using the tools that we have, and then start to then move that up. So it becomes, it's like crystal clear waters at that point. And we found that just by doing it this way, companies actually start to move faster, start to leverage AI, leverage all the different projects and the things that they're wanting to do. And it's without even, they don't even have to now outsource their data to third parties anymore, right? So if you're really sensitive and you're worried about creating that these types of processes to move to third party and clouds and what have you, there's always a potential for security breach, or that intellectual property or trade secrets can get out. So this keeps it within the four walls. So you have a lot of power and control on where you and how you are implementing these third party. And I'm not saying don't use them, just saying let's use them and use all of this better to really get to the outcome that everyone's wanting to get to.
Yep. Use each for what their strong suit is.
Exactly.
And make sure you're focused on that. So, we spent a lot of time on the front side of this, right? Data cleanup and all of that, getting ready to use AI. And, let's talk a little bit here as we kind of come to the close of this discussion about the final step, right? Closing the AI project cycle loop. And I think, you've talked about AI project cycle 4 and start the modeling step. And, now that Crystal Onyx is involved, and within a matter of weeks, we've got data readiness is completed, the data classification steps have been completed, a quality data set, has been curated, or data sets, and now AI training can begin. So tell me what's next.
Well, before we go to what's next, I know we kind of touched on this, but I would say don't assume AI will solve all of your problems.
Okay.
Right? If you think it's a panacea, it's not. If your data is not ready, it's not quality, it's not set up ready to go, and you're just focusing on the AI tools and the cool shiny things, it's going to fail, right? Because it really has to start with smarter data management, and that's really kind of what we were just talking about. And so the faster you can efficiently clean up, classify, curate, the better your AI outcome and better your insights will be. And there's a consultant, her name's Liette Manzur. I came across her about a month ago. She's an AI advisor, and she's former CVP of Microsoft. And she had a great quote. I loved it. She says that AI isn't a solution, it's a force multiplier. And you look at what's going on, and it really is. It's just amazing about what are the things that, if you do it right, the outcome you can create. And she goes on to say, if your data, goals, and processes are broken, AI will amplify that chaos. And her number one item on her AI project checklist that she preaches is data readiness. Make sure your data is clean, make sure it's structured, make sure it's accessible. And so that's the things that we started to focus on originally, and we cut our teeth on it for high performance computing. And we're working in some of the most challenging environments in the world, where we're going through and scanning hundreds of petabytes to even exabytes, in a single pass, and then being able to start taking action and copying and migrating and doing all the cool things with it, but doing it at a point where we're doing it at scale. And so I think, as you're going through and starting now to apply this from an enterprise standpoint, there's a lot of things that we've learned over the last number of years that are perfect lessons learned for creating a successful AI project.
Now you're speaking my speak, right? We're talking about business processes first, and then tools follow, right?
Yes.
You gotta make sure that you've got good ways of working, good best practices, all of that good stuff. And then you want to focus, like we've talked about, on your pain points, your problem statements, and then make sure that we really understand those well before we go and expect any kind of a magic wand to do anything for us. So we just really need to treat it like a true project and really scope it out properly and have clear expectations.
Absolutely. Completely 100% agree.
I love it. Tony, we've talked about a ton of things here today. We've had a lot of good takeaways. first, I'd love, if people are more interested in learning about Crystal Onyx or having a conversation with you about anything that we've talked about today, or just the capabilities of your tool and your solution, where can listeners learn more about Crystal Onyx?
Absolutely. Thanks, Brandy. They can invite them to come and visit our website. It's crystalonyx.com. It's CrystalOnyx.com. Or send an email. You can send it to info@crystalonyx.com. Again, CrystalOnyx. That comes right to my email. I'll see it, respond back, let us know what we can do to help. Any questions, anything we can do, we're here to help. And I just love talking with different people, different organizations, because every organization is a chance not only just to share what we're doing, but also learn more.
Yeah, I highly encourage everyone to do so. I know Tony's been working on some rapid start programs as well to help organizations get a taste test of the benefits of what Crystal Onyx can provide. And you can do that, very quickly and get a little trial, a little pilot run for you before you dive deep.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great way to start. I mean, it's low risk, right? Because we kept thinking we have this great thing that we spent just years working on that we think we find really fine-tuned it. And encourage and wanted to open this up. So, whenever you start any type of new technology, right, in implementation, it goes through an evaluation. We're not going to just risk everything we're doing, put something in and say, well, okay, well, I hope it works. So thinking through this, I thought, well, let's come up with a different approach on this. And so let's do a rapid start. And so for a very nominal fee, you can go have 3 months, download the software, install it on your system in your environment, either whether it's a VM on a bare metal server, even on a cloud compute in whatever works for you. And then you'll be up and running within 2 to 3 hours. And then within another hour, 2 hours after that, you've now scanned, probably a couple million different files within your system, and can actually start taking steps through this. So within, half a day, already on your way to start, getting ready for data readiness, and just start that process of, okay, how do we apply it? How do we take this and start applying our model and just start playing, and, even start playing with it. I encourage everyone, try it out. It's a rapid start program. You can see on the website. Send me an email at info@crystalonyx.com. I'll send you a link to get started, and then we can talk further.
I love it. All right, Tony, thank you so much. I appreciate the time today, as always, and we look forward to talking to you again here back on the podcast.
Great, Brandy. Thank you so much. Great to speak with you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe and review the show. And for more information on IpX, visit ipxhq.com.